A few weeks ago, I found myself in a quiet, wood-paneled conference room in Brussels, listening to a panel of experts debate the linguistic inclusivity of a proposed digital transit platform. For 3 hours, the most brilliant minds in the room agonized over whether a specific button color might inadvertently trigger social anxiety in users. It was civil, academic, and entirely detached from the physical world. When I stepped out for a break and checked my phone, I saw a headline that felt like a localized earthquake: 9.5 billion trips. That is the projected number of passenger movements for the 2026 Spring Festival in China. While my colleagues in Brussels were struggling to finalize a 20-page memo on digital safety, a different civilization was preparing to move more than the entire global population across a single landmass in just 40 days. Every second, 30,000 human beings, vectors of mass, energy, and velocity, were being calculated, routed, and synchronized by a system that has no time for procedural theater. I mentioned this figure to one of the experts during lunch. He looked at me, blinked, and then immediately pivoted back to the importance of the subcommittee's voting quorum. He couldn't process it. To him, the physical reality of 9.5 billion people in motion was just an abstract statistic, while the font size of a government website was a crisis. This jarring disconnect between a world obsessed with the nuances of Vitocracy and a civilization operating on the raw laws of thermodynamics is the real story of 2026. While the West is busy debating the grammar of its own decline, the East is undergoing a civilizational stress test that measures success in kilowatts, kilometers, and kilograms. This isn't just about travel. It's a physical reality check for the 21st century. I have to say, every time I read that, it just lands with such a thud. It feels, I don't know, less like an introduction and more like a diagnosis.
It is a diagnosis. Or maybe it's a splash of cold water. It's designed to shock you out of one reality and force you to look at another one. The reality of physics.
The reality of the engine room, not the conference room.
Exactly. The map versus the territory.
Right. And be perfectly clear, this is not a travel show. We're not going to be talking about the best places to visit or, how to navigate the crowds.
No travel tips here. Yeah.
We're doing something colder, more analytical. We're treating this whole event, the 2026 Spring Festival Chunyun, as they call it, as a massive calibrated experiment.
A stress test, a civilizational stress test.
A stress test. You think about a car engine. You can't tell what it's really capable of when it's just idling in the driveway.
Right.
You only find out its limits when you take it to the track and you redline it. You push the RPMs all the way into the red zone and see if the engine holds together or if it throws a rod.
And 9.5 billion passenger trips in 40 days. That is redlining a civilization. It's pushing the entire social and industrial metabolism to its absolute physical limit.
We're going to strip away the cultural layer, the sentimentality of family reunions, and we're going to look at the machine underneath, the raw mechanics.
The kilowatts, the kilometers, the kilograms.
Exactly. The energy loads, the logistics algorithms, the governance models that even make something like this conceivable, let alone possible. And in doing that, I think we're inevitably going to hold up a mirror to our own systems.
A mirror that might show a pretty uncomfortable reflection.
I think it's guaranteed to be uncomfortable because what we're really looking at here is a fundamental collision of two worldviews. It's what the opening text called Vitocracy versus technocracy.
The paralysis of procedure versus governance by engineering problem solving.
It's the difference between having a 3-hour debate about the theory of flight and actually getting a 747 off the ground.
And to understand how that plane gets off the ground, we have to go beyond the abstract. We have to get into the nuts and bolts.
Right. So I want to take you to a specific place. Forget the crowded train stations for a moment. I want to take you to the nerve center. Imagine a room deep in the Yangtze River Delta. It's more of a bunker than an office. No windows, climate-controlled, humming with servers.
This is a regional power grid control center.
Exactly. And inside, at a console, is a senior engineer. And he's not thinking about the holiday. He's not thinking about dumplings.
No, Chen is watching the heartbeat of an entire industrial civilization on a wall of monitors.
And what he's seeing isn't, people. He's seeing load. He's seeing demand. He's seeing frequency. He's seeing physics in its rawest form.
This is where we have to get a little technical because it's so important. Most of us, we just take the electrical grid for granted. You flick a switch, the light comes on. End of story.
But for Chen, that's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a terrifyingly complex math problem. I was reading about the specs for these control centers, and the level of precision they operate at is just It's mind-boggling. They have to maintain the grid frequency at exactly 50 hertz.
Exactly 50 hertz. And that's not an arbitrary number. That is the synchronized rotational speed of every single massive turbine in the entire grid, spinning in perfect lockstep.
So what happens when that number changes? What happens when millions of people start their journeys and hundreds of high-speed trains all decide to accelerate at the exact same moment?
Well, demand suddenly spikes. It outstrips supply, even for a fraction of a second. And the physical consequence is that the turbines start to slow down. They can't keep up. So that 50 hertz, it drops, maybe to 49.9, then 49.8.
And that doesn't sound like a big deal. It's a tiny fraction.
It is a colossal deal. If that frequency drops too low, say it hits 49.5 hertz, the laws of physics take over in a very brutal way. The turbines begin to vibrate violently. They're designed to protect themselves, so they automatically disconnect from the grid to avoid tearing themselves apart.
So one power plant goes offline.
Right. But when that one goes offline, its load is instantly dumped onto all the other power plants in the network, which makes them slow down even more, causing them to trip offline. It's a cascade failure, a catastrophic domino effect. Within seconds, you can have a blackout that covers 3 provinces and affects hundreds of millions of people, all because of a half a hertz drop in frequency.
So Chen is sitting there, staring at his screen, and he sees the line. Just dip. It's the absolute peak of the 2026 travel rush. A huge surge from the railway network. The grid is wobbling on the edge of collapse.
Now, in a different system, how do you solve that underlying problem? The problem of insufficient peak capacity.
Say I'm in, I don't know, California or Germany. And I realize we need a new high-voltage transmission line to stabilize the grid during peak events. What's the first thing I do?
You hire a team of lawyers.
Hey, chuckles, not engineers. Lawyers.
It's not a joke. You have to file for permits. That triggers a multi-year environmental impact study. Then you have public consultation periods that can last for months.
And then the objections start. A local community group files a lawsuit because the new power lines will spoil their view.
An environmental group finds a rare species of frog that lives along the proposed route and gets an injunction. A rival energy company lobbies politicians to block the project.
This is Vitocracy.
This is the very definition of Vetocracy. It's a term that Francis Fukuyama coined, and it's essential to understanding this entire deep dive. But Vetocracy is not the same as a democracy. It's a dysfunctional form of governance where the power to say no, the veto power, is so widely distributed that almost anyone can block action.
So everyone has a brake pedal.
Everyone has a brake pedal, and absolutely nobody has a steering wheel or an accelerator. The system is designed to prevent action, not to enable it.
You see these endless stories of predatory delay where the goal isn't even to win the argument on its merits. It's just to stall the project for so long that the funding disappears or the political will just evaporates.
And the classic example they always point to is the Second Avenue subway in New York City.
It was first proposed in the 1920s. Construction started and stopped multiple times over the decades. The first tiny section of it finally opened in 2017.
96 years.
96 years. Entire generations of New Yorkers lived and died waiting for a subway line that was perpetually under discussion. That is the real-world cost of Vetocracy. The procedure, the right to object, becomes more important than the physical outcome of actually having a functioning subway. But Chen, back in his control room, he doesn't have 96 years. He doesn't even have 96 seconds. He has maybe a few hundred milliseconds before the grid goes down.
And this is where you see the technocracy in action. Chen sees the frequency dip. He does not convene a subcommittee. He doesn't check for a voting quorum. He, or more accurately, the highly automated system he is supervising, simply executes.
And what does that execution look like? Is he calling power plants and telling them to ramp up?
It's faster than that. And it's more brutal. The system's logistics algorithms instantly identify non-critical loads on the grid.
What's a non-critical load?
It could be a massive aluminum smelting plant 2 provinces away that's consuming a gigantic amount of electricity. It could be the decorative lighting on a new shopping mall. The system makes a cold, calculated decision based on preset priorities.
And the top priority is?
The train. The train must move. The system sends a signal, and in less than a second, the power to that aluminum smelter is cut. The lights in the shopping mall dim by 20%.
No one asks.
The energy is instantly rerouted from the industrial and commercial sectors and shunted directly into the high-speed rails traction network. The frequency stabilizes. The train keeps moving at 350 kilometers per hour. The passengers don't even know a crisis was just averted.
It's infrastructure as a service. but in the most literal, ruthless way possible. The railway is the priority client, and everyone else's service level is subject to change without notice.
But look at the mindset. The core metric isn't profit and loss. It isn't, will the smelter sue us for lost production? The metric is purely physical. Does the system function? Does the train move? It's a binary yes or no question.
It just hammers home that line from the opening piece. You cannot finance your way through the laws of physics. We in the West have become so obsessed with the world of finance, with derivatives, with abstract metrics, that we've started to believe they are reality.
We think money is the same as energy. Not. Money is just a claim on energy. You can print trillions of dollars, but you cannot print a single kilowatt hour of electricity. You have to physically generate it, transmit it, and manage it.
And an event like this 9.5 billion trip event, it's so massive that it shatters that illusion. The only currency that matters at that scale is thermodynamics, joules and watts.
It forces a return to the concrete, to the physical.
Speaking of the physical, let's pivot from the guy behind the curtain, from Chen, to the people actually moving through this system. What does it feel like to be one of those vectors of mass?
The person in the crowd.
Exactly. I was looking into this from the perspective of the user interface, the software layer, and I found this fascinating account from a young software developer. We'll call her Xiaoli. She works for a tech giant in Shenzhen, a very modern city, and she's traveling home to her family in rural Guizhou.
That's a classic migration path, from the hyper-modern coastal megacity back to the developing interior.
Right. And because she's a developer, she's documenting her journey, but she's not taking pictures of the scenery. She's recording the systems. She's geeking out over what she calls the smart guidance systems in the massive transit hubs.
And what she's seeing is something logistics experts have been talking about for years. She's seeing the physical internet in action.
Okay, let's pause there, because that term, physical internet, sounds like some kind of, marketing buzzword.
It does, but it's a very serious, very rigorous engineering concept. It's not just a metaphor.
Yes. What on earth is a physical internet?
Okay, think about how the digital internet works. You write an email, you hit send, your email is broken down by the system into thousands of tiny little data packets.
Little bundles of ones and zeros.
Actually, each packet is given an address and they're all sent out into the network. One packet might go through a server in Frankfurt, another might bounce off a satellite. You don't know the route and you don't care. The network automatically routes each packet based on traffic and congestion. If one path is blocked, the packets just find another way. They all arrive at the destination and reassemble themselves. The physical internet, or PI, applies that exact same logic not to bits, but to atoms, to physical things, to shipping containers, to packages, and in the case of Chunyun, to people.
So you're saying Xiaoli, she's a data packet.
From the system's perspective, yes. She is a standardized unit of mass that needs to be moved from point A to point B with maximum efficiency.
That sounds incredibly dystopian, dehumanizing.
It sounds dehumanizing, but let's consider the alternative for a second. The alternative is treating 9.5 billion trips as 9.5 billion unique, individual, chaotic human stories. And if you do that, the system instantly grinds to a halt. You get gridlock, you get crushes. To manage this kind of scale, you have to standardize the process.
Okay, so walk me through her experience. How does this work for her on the ground?
She walks into the train station. She doesn't have a paper ticket. She doesn't even take her phone out of her pocket. Her face is her ticket. Her face is her IP address.
Facial recognition.
But not the slow kind you see at an airport. We're talking about advanced systems that use gait recognition, body shape. They identify her in a massive moving crowd from the moment she enters the building's perimeter.
And the latency on that has to be insane.
The data suggests it's under 800 milliseconds, so instantly, the system knows. Xiaoli is here. Her train to Guizhou leaves from platform 4 in 40 minutes. But, and this is the crucial part, the smart part, the system also knows, from thousands of sensors, that platform 4 is currently experiencing a 15% passenger density overload.
It knows the platform is getting dangerously crowded.
So the physical internet's routing algorithm kicks in. Before Xiaoli even gets near main concourse, a large digital sign in front of her changes. The arrow that was pointing left towards platform 4 suddenly points right, towards a secondary waiting area on a different level.
So it's rerouting the human traffic.
It's rerouting the packets to balance the load across the physical network. Just like the digital internet reroutes data away from a congested server. It's server load balancing, but with human beings.
And this is what she was filming, what she was amazed by.
Because her perspective is completely different from ours. She's not thinking, oh, this is surveillance, this is Big Brother. She's looking at a system that is preventing a dangerous crush. She posted this video of herself just walking smoothly through a sea of tens of thousands of people, and she just kept saying, it flows, there's no pushing, no shoving. Flow.
And that's what's so jarring. I'm watching her video, and my Western-trained brain is just flashing with red lights. Privacy, data security, surveillance state. But for her, none of that matters as much as the simple fact that she is going to get home to see her grandmother safely and on time.
It's a different set of priorities, and this brings us to a really fundamental concept from physics that applies here, entropy.
The second law of thermodynamics, right?
Okay.
That everything tends towards disorder.
Yes. In any closed system, entropy, which is just a measure of chaos, disorder, randomness, always increases over time. Buildings crumble, complex systems fail, crowds become mobs. It is the default state of the universe.
And when you look at a lot of our public infrastructure in the West right now, it feels like we are losing the war against entropy.
I mean, the source material points to examples like the CCTV cameras on the London Underground failing during heat waves, or the constant operational meltdowns on San Francisco's public transit. That is high entropy. The system is becoming more disordered, less reliable. It's decaying.
So what is the Chinese model trying to do in these terms?
It is a conscious, high-energy attempt to reverse entropy, to create what you could call a bubble of negentropy or negative entropy. They are pouring a colossal amount of energy, computational energy, electrical energy, social energy into the system to force order out of the natural state of chaos.
But that energy cost is huge.
It's astronomical. It requires total information awareness. It requires predictive algorithms. And it requires a population that is willing, for the most part, to behave like predictable packets. But the payoff is a system that functions at a scale that would otherwise be impossible.
It really makes you reconsider the definition of freedom. You know, we in the West tend to define it as freedom from being watched, freedom from being told what to do.
What political philosophers call negative liberty, the freedom from external constraint.
Right. But for someone like Xiao Li, in that moment, she seems to be experiencing a different kind of freedom. The freedom to actually move. The freedom to complete her journey. The freedom from the paralysis of a collapsed system.
The freedom from paralysis, that's a very powerful way to frame it.
And it doesn't just apply to the train station, it's the whole journey.
Yes, this is where the concept of synchromodality comes in.
Synchro what?
Synchromodality. It means that all the different modes of transport are synchronized into one seamless network. So Xiao Li's high-speed train is scheduled to arrive at 2:15 p.m. The local subway system's algorithm sees that arrival and automatically schedules an extra train to be waiting at the station at 2:20 p.m. The city's autonomous taxi fleet is connected to the same network. It sees that 1,200 people are getting off that train and will be exiting the subway in that district around 2:40 p.m., so it automatically prepositions 300 taxis in the area to handle the surge. The transfer from train to subway to car is designed to be frictionless.
Whereas here, the train company, the subway operator, and the taxi service are three completely different entities that barely talk to each other, if at all.
Exactly. Each one is its own isolated high-entropy system. There's no synchronization. In the model they're building, it's treated as a single integrated organism, the physical internet.
But again, this entire organism, this perfectly synchronized machine, it depends on the cooperation of the people inside it. The cogs have to be willing to be cogs.
Absolutely. You can have the most advanced AI in the world, but if the people decide to ignore the signs, jump the barriers, or just start pushing, the physics of crowd dynamics breaks down very, very quickly. And that brings us to the social layer, the trust.
Which is the perfect lead-in to the third perspective I wanted to explore. We've had the engineer in the control room and the developer in the station. Now let's look at the passenger who has seen it all. The long-term migrant worker.
The person who represents the historical memory of this event.
I was following the story of a man in his 60s, let's call him Lao Wang. He's been making this journey from a factory in the south back to his home village in the north for over 30 years.
So he would remember the old green skin trains, the slow trains.
He posted this photo online that was it was incredibly powerful, a side-by-side comparison. On the left is a photo from the early 1990s. It's the inside of one of those old green-skin trains. It's packed beyond belief. People are standing in the aisles, sitting on their luggage, sleeping under the seats. The air looks thick. You can almost smell the cigarette smoke and instant noodles.
A journey of sheer endurance, a physical ordeal.
He said that trip used to take him 3 full days. And on the right side of the image is a photo from his 2026 trip. He's sitting in a spacious, clean seat on a CR400 Fuxing bullet train, which travels at 350 kilometers per hour. The cabin is quiet. He's got a power outlet for his phone. That same journey now takes him 5 hours.
That's not just an upgrade. That is a fundamental transformation of space and time.
But what really struck me was his commentary. He wasn't just talking about the speed or the comfort. He was talking about the people, about the change in social behavior. He used the phrase, high social trust. He described how, in the old days, getting on the train was a battle, a literal fight. You had to push and shove your way on. It was, in his words, every man for himself. Because you didn't trust that the system would work, you didn't trust that you'd get a seat or even get on the train at all.
A low-trust environment leads to chaotic, individualistic behavior.
But now, he said, people queue. They wait patiently. They're quiet. He said, we trust the system. We trust that our seat will be there. We trust that the train will leave on time. He sees this orderliness, this collective discipline, as a form of tangible dignity.
Tangible dignity. The state keeps its promise of a clean, punctual, safe journey.
And in return, the citizen keeps their side of the bargain by behaving in an orderly, predictable way.
This goes right back to Fukuyama's other big idea, the concept of the strong state.
Right, but isn't Fukuyama the end of history guy? The one who argued that liberal democracy is the final destination for all societies?
But in his later, more detailed work on political order, he makes a much more nuanced point. He argues that for a liberal democracy to be successful and stable, it must be preceded by a strong, effective state. You need to have a competent bureaucracy, the rule of law, and the sheer capacity to deliver basic services first.
So you need order before you can have liberty.
Yes. If you try to introduce mass democracy into a society that doesn't have a functioning state apparatus, you don't get Denmark. Chaos. You get corruption, gridlock, and societal collapse.
And China is the modern archetype of the strong state.
A very powerful one. And the implicit argument Lao Wang is making is that the Chinese population has entered into a social contract. They have traded certain individual liberties, the kind of liberties that fuel a Vetocracy, like the right to protest a new rail line or the right to absolute privacy in exchange for state capacity.
They trade the right to object for the guarantee that the train will actually be built and that it will run on time.
It's a massive transaction, and the everyday currency of that transaction is what some analysts call social granularity. Social granularity is about the fine details. Does the state pick up the trash on time? Are the streets clean? Is the bathroom in the train station usable? When a state consistently delivers on these high granularity, tangible things, it builds immense legitimacy and trust.
The source material also used the term freedom from fear.
Yes. Think about the basic feeling of safety in a public space. For Lao Wang, walking through that massive crowded station, he's probably in one of the most heavily surveilled places on Earth. But he feels safe. He's not worried about crime. He's not navigating a chaotic or threatening environment. Compare that to the state of many major transit hubs in the West, which have become zones of high anxiety and insecurity.
Okay, but we have to be extremely careful here. We cannot present this as some kind of techno-utopia. This system comes with enormous costs and risks.
Absolutely. And it's our job to put this on the table. This is not a one-sided story. The China speed model has a very dark side to its balance sheet.
You cannot build 3,200 kilometers of new high-speed rail in a single year with cash.
No, that is fueled by staggering levels of debt. The massive 4 trillion yuan stimulus after the 2008 financial crisis basically turbocharged this model, but it also created a mountain of local government debt. The estimates today put that figure somewhere around 76 trillion yuan.
76 trillion. It's a number so large it becomes meaningless.
It's a huge economic vulnerability. It means the entire high-speed, high-efficiency system is running on the assumption that future economic growth will be strong enough to service that debt. It's a high-stakes bet on the future.
And what about the environmental cost? The speed of that initial industrialization was brutal on the environment.
It was catastrophic. The statistic that 60% of the country's rivers were polluted is a direct consequence of prioritizing speed above all else. Now, to be fair, the current policy is a shift towards high-quality development with massive investment in green energy and sustainable tech. But you can't undo that initial damage overnight.
And then there's the inequality. Lao Wang gets a fast train home, which is great. But the income gap between his factory city and his home village is still enormous. Something like 2.5 to 1.
Right. The physical connection has improved dramatically, but the economic chasm remains. And that highlights the central fragility of this entire technocratic model. It's like a Formula One car. It's incredibly powerful and efficient, but it's also incredibly fragile and requires constant high-level maintenance.
The legitimacy of the entire system rests on its ability to keep delivering tangible results, keep the economy growing, keep the trains on time, keep the power on.
If the machine stutters, if growth slows, if a crisis hits, then the social contract starts to look very different. Lao Wang's trust could evaporate. Zhao Li's efficient guidance system could suddenly feel like oppressive surveillance. They cannot afford a system failure.
It's strange, but from that perspective, our Western Vitocracy almost looks like a luxury, a product of immense stability and wealth. We can afford the inefficiency.
That is a very sharp point. We have the luxury of spending 96 years debating a subway because the fundamental legitimacy of our states doesn't depend on whether that subway gets built this decade or the next.
We can afford to prioritize the moral beauty of the process, making sure every possible objection is heard over the physical ugliness of getting things done.
But the core argument of the material we're looking at is that the 21st century is going to be an era where that luxury becomes a strategic liability.
Right. This is where the metaphor of the seasons comes in. Civilization winter versus civilization spring or prime.
The West is portrayed as being in a civilization winter, a period of slowing metabolism, of declining ability to manipulate the physical world.
This idea of rights inflation.
Yes. The argument that we've created so many overlapping veto points, so many procedural rights to object and delay, that we've essentially inflated the currency of rights to the point of worthlessness and have paralyzed our collective ability to act. We've traded capability for procedure.
While the East is in its civilization spring, high energy, rapid growth, massive physical expansion.
When you hear about their grid absorbing an 18.7% peak load increase with precision control, that is the signature of a civilization with a young, powerful, and highly functional industrial metabolism.
It's a completely different way of framing the global competition. We're so used to seeing it through an ideological lens. Democracy versus autocracy.
Or capitalism versus communism, even though those labels don't really fit anymore.
Right. But this analysis suggests we're looking at the wrong things. It suggests the ultimate metric of civilizational fitness isn't your political philosophy. It's your relationship with physics.
Can you organize matter effectively? Can you harness and direct energy at scale? History is pretty clear on this. Civilizations that master the physical world tend to write the history books. It's not about having the most beautiful debates, it's about having the most effective logistics.
The Romans had their roads, the British had their steamship.
And now we're looking at the physical internet. And the brutal question that the 2026 Chunyun forces us to ask is, in an increasingly dangerous and resource-constrained world, which governance model is better adapted for long-term survival? The one that debates a button color for 3 hours, or the one that moves 9.5 billion people in 40 days?
It's a stark choice when you frame it like that.
Physics is stark. Thermodynamics is the ultimate arbiter. It has no ideology. It doesn't care about our committee reports or our eloquent speeches. It only measures inputs, outputs, and efficiency.
So this massive human migration, this holiday festival, it's not really a cultural event in this context. It's a clinical trial.
It is a clinical trial of civilizational vitality, a test result printed out in kilowatts and kilometers. It's answering the question, is this social organism vigorous and capable, or is it sclerotic and in decline?
And 9.5 billion trips is a very loud, very clear answer.
It's the sound of a system that has made a clear choice to prioritize tangible reality over abstract procedure.
We started this whole deep dive in that quiet, wood-paneled conference room in Brussels. I can still picture it. So civilized, so detached.
A world constructed entirely out of words and ideas.
And we've ended up here.
Yeah.
Staring at a frequency monitor in a power grid bunker, watching a crowd flow algorithm on a developer's phone, riding a bullet train that is shrinking a continent.
The world of physical things.
The disconnect is it's breathtaking. It's the difference between a civilization busy debating the grammar of its own decline, as the text says, and one that is subjecting itself to a physical reality check of unprecedented scale.
You can debate pronouns, you can debate committees, you can debate regulations.
But you cannot debate the laws of thermodynamics. Physical reality, unlike a committee meeting, never lies.